Did you know that in South Korea it is commonly believed that if you leave the fan on overnight in a closed room that you'll die? Typically because it's believed that you'll catch hypothermia and or asphyxiate. Source below. This is widely endorsed by many people in South Korea, including some doctors. The South Korean government itself has even issued warnings warning people to turn their fans off at night. Source below. And there's some solid sounding scientific rationalization there to back it up. Of course there's no real science to back it up. Does this bother anybody outside of South Korea? Not really. But to the South Korean people it's very true. It kind of makes you wonder, what viewpoints do we Americans hold so deeply without any backing of science? I'm going to resist the urge to rant about the mountains of pseudoscience that we as Americans gorge upon. Instead, I'm going to just pull one worm out of this can. Don't worry, it's a Wrigley worm. The American education system. Gross. Now, because I'm diving into education, I'm going to put a lot of sources here. A lot of citations down below. This should come as a surprise to nobody who knows me. I am a logical-minded person. I like sources. I clearly use the left side of my brain more than I use the right side. I'm also a visual learner, so I love pouring through these kinds of studies. Many people don't, though, and that's fine. Many people are auditory learners. They don't like reading all this crap. That's why Jin and Owls makes these videos. Sadly, if you're a kinesthetic learner, you're SOL. You can't really touch a YouTube video. Alright, ready to drop this worm. There's no such thing as left or right brain people, and as far as the data shows, the idea that we have different learning styles like visual, auditory, or kinesthetic is a heaping pile of pseudoscientific feces. So, there. Now, sorry. You don't really favor the left or the right side of your brain. Source below. Nobody really does. Source below. Turns out what we've been told about the left side of the brain being logical and the right side of the brain being creative is not really science. Logic and creativity are pretty closely linked in the brain, and they occur in both sides. Just about everything requires a dose of logic and creativity. Art is a very creative passion, but logic is vital to the execution. Picasso was great not because he just threw out everything he knew about painting. It was he threw out and broke the right rules in a logical, systematic way. And something like physics is extremely creative. Being good at math is not enough to be a good physicist. Einstein was not great because he understood calculus really well. He was great because he understood calculus and he had the creativity to come up with unfathomable ideas like relativity. You don't get to relativity just through logic. Relativity is a burst of creative insight. Humanity is great because it looks at the void and posits both logic and creativity. Okay. So you're not left brain or right brain. You know deep down that you're either a visual learner or an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner. You know if you like to touch things or hear things or see things and read things. Nope, not really. You may prefer some of those things, but they don't help you learn. Source below. And it's not to say that scientists haven't looked. They have. They've looked a lot. They just can't find any proof that they exist. Source below. And yet, this is the basis of all modern American education. You would be shocked at how much of a teacher's further education is taken up with learning strategies on how to differentiate our instruction based upon what kind of learners we have in our classroom. In some places, I have been expected to document how I separated my lesson into visual, auditory, and kinesthetic components. Why do we spend so much time adapting for differences that don't exist? And you know, I think it's because as Americans, we are just freaking obsessed with being special. American education is just consumed and obsessed with the idea of specialness. Don't let anybody define you. Be yourself. Be yourself. Be yourself. This is just mentally crippling our students. You suck at taking notes. That's not your fault. You're just not a visual learner. Except visual learners don't exist. In reality, it's likely you never tried to take notes. Or more likely, nobody ever expected you to take notes. Maybe you just need more practice, or maybe it's one of 100 other reasons. Either way, when it became clear that you suck at taking notes, your parents and or your teachers gave up on it. They just said, you're a visual learner, this isn't your strength, how dare anybody make you try to do this. They never tried to make you better at it, because it's not who you are. Truth is, we all learn in fairly similar ways. We should be able to do almost anything that a classical education demands. That's what it is to make us a rounded person. But we don't want well-rounded people anymore. We want special people. We cut out things like lectures. Lectures! We're not allowed to give lectures as teachers anymore. I cannot stand in front of the class and teach by talking. Lectures were the primary form of education for the last 3,000 years. And it's not like it didn't work. It worked really well. I am often demonized for lecturing. But the same people then turn around in shocked awe that their students are failing in college, where they don't know how to listen to a professor talk. I'm going to posit something that could offend somebody. If lectures bore you, maybe it's your fault. Maybe you need to work on intellectual endurance. Now, I should state, I am not positing that lecture is the only way to teach. Not by a long shot. As one of the studies that I cited below states, quote, "The optimal curriculum for a writing course probably includes a heavy verbal emphasis, whereas the most efficient and effective method of teaching geometry obviously requires visual, spatial materials." Of course, identifying the optimal approach for each discipline is an empirical question, and we espouse research using strong research methods to identify the optimal approach for each kind of subject matter. What this means is we should be differentiating the way we teach each topic, course, and subject. We should not be differentiating for each student. Also, I am not saying that some students don't have learning disabilities or things that inhibit their abilities to do one thing or the other. Some do. What I am saying is most don't. And I'm also not saying that everybody is exactly the same. Far from it, we have our own talents, and those talents ought to be fostered. But they are not fostered by lowering our expectations. Just because you're creative doesn't mean you shouldn't learn math. And just because you're good at calculus doesn't mean you shouldn't understand the composition of painting. I guess what it comes down to is we really need to stop pandering to our students. It's not our jobs to make them comfortable. It's not our jobs to make them happy. The teacher's job is to take a child and through fire and pain, help turn them into a well-rounded adult. We need to throw away all these pseudoscientific nonsenses that have been heaped upon us for the last 50 years. They aren't helping. In fact, they're hurting. A lot. Instead, we gotta go back to the basics. Classical education wasn't broke. So why have we spent the last 50 plus years trying to fix it? Let's quit trying to reinvent the wheel and instead use the teaching methods that have been honed and perfected for thousands of years. I don't know why we ever threw them away. Alright, Dan, you need a writing challenge. I really am enjoying writing the serial. So, Dan, I want you to start writing something that could be serialized. I think it needs to have some sort of historical component. Keep it to 2 pages to start, and I'll catch you next week.